I'm Martin Bargahare. I was facilitating session 3, and it was about evaluation as transformative process. We had 3 presenters. One was examining partnership between peacekeeping and UN country teams with transformative lens. Main key highlights from that was UNEG does not emphasize on peace, while peace is among the 5 Ps of the Sustainable Development Goals. They did evaluation in Haiti and came vividly that integration is not evident in operations of peacekeeping missions with UN country teams. Also, what came out was that UN goals, the way they are set, are ahead of reality. We also had a presentation on stock take on cultural responsive evaluations. This was from UNESCO. What came out was that cultural diversity allows us to grow together. Cultural dimensions cannot be separated from socio-cultural contexts in which programs are implemented. But also the findings was that cultural dimensions remain limited in evaluations. And if programs are not culture responsive, it is very difficult to apply culture responsive evaluation approach. We also had the third and last presentation. It was on using the monitoring evaluation facility to identify sources of transformative power. It was from UNSIRI. They did 31 projects in Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand. It costed 50 euros. What was coming out from this presentation as highlights is that before you monitor and evaluate, know the culture, the context, and the people. For sustainability of the project, you should know the motivations of the people at the center of the project. And the presenter grouped them in 3 dimensions, categories. There are those who work really as scientists, as people who work professional with no individual interests. The second group are those ones who work as professionals, but they have individual interests. There are those ones who work with personal issues, really those ones who are egocentric. Contributions from the participants came up with the questions of whom does evaluation serve? Also, there was a question of what is the relevance of cultural approach in the present time when doing development evaluations.
I facilitated the session on sustainable development and transformative change with the idea of enlightening, understanding better what do we mean by transformative change in terms of operations and evaluation. So I have a wonderful rapporteur here that will summarize our discussion.
So the theme or the topic of the session, as my colleague said, was around sustainable development and transformative change. And the discussion was around 3 questions that the facilitator announced at the beginning so that the presenters can structure their contribution towards these questions. So the first one was about what are the transformative changes needed from the perspective of the presenter and his agency. The second is what are the key initiatives and action that the UN agency and government are supporting in terms of sustainable development, taking into account also the experience of the presenters. And the third question was what evaluation methods can be used and what results are being achieved in evaluating the progress toward achieving the transformational changes. We had three presenters, the first from UN Habitat, and the presenter highlighted the importance the importance to take into account the role played by the cities in the development and in achieving sustainable development. He highlighted the fact that currently more than 55% of humans live in cities, and this number is expected to grow to 66% by 2050. Therefore, if we are serious about achieving sustainable development, we need to include cities in our planning and in our agenda. So we need to aim for, and he used the word dream, to dream of cities which are productive, prosperous, and safe, which are also green and inclusive. We need to combat inequality in cities where this phenomena is being the highest, and we need to recognize the key role played by the cities in the agenda of 2030. He gave the example of what UN Habitat has developed, which is a global platform to measure prosperities in cities across 6 dimensions, including quality of life, equity, etc. And currently more than 300 cities have joined this platform. Some of the challenges faced by this platform are related to data. The second presenter gave the case of FAO, basically, and the fact that FAO has recently rethought its approach to rural development, to poverty reduction, and the fact that it recognizes poverty as being a multifaceted issue and therefore needs a multi-sectoral and territorial approach. Therefore, FAO has decided to first do a thinking and rethink the categories that it is planning to target in its efforts to reduce rural poverty. So for better targeting and identification, and also it recognizes the fact that as a technical agency, it has to partner with other actors in the rural development arena, such as MDBs, UN agencies, and governments. FAO, in particular, has developed 3 types of intervention. The first one is access and empowerment, basically supporting rural communities to have access to services, markets, finance, etc. Empowering the vulnerable, such as the youth and the women, to have more voice and be heard at the policy level. The second one is decent rural employment, which is basically promoting on-farm but also off-farm employment at the rural level. Again, taking into account the specific needs of the vulnerable, such as the youth and women, and also taking into account the contextual situation of different countries. And the third one is the social protection, social protection intervention, which is basically recognizing the need to support the most vulnerable by cash transfer programs, but also by helping governments better run their already existing social protection programs by providing them with reliable data and evidence generated through programs such as the P2P, for example. And how did the Office of Evaluation evaluate, and how can this be evaluated? Progress toward achieving these results is, since impact takes a long time, so we're looking here at intermediary results. For example, the policy uptake by government, the budgetary commitment in terms of by government, and also through donors, the fact that donors are partnering and committed to these interventions and these ways of thinking. And the third one is beneficiary ownership through impact assessments. Challenges, of course, include data availability, timeline for results. These usually are long-term project and intervention and require longer term to see an impact on the results, and also attribution issues. Yes. Third presenter talked about from Jeff and how Jeff has been trying to evaluate transformational changes and identify the criteria for the key elements to characterize transformational changes in Jeff's project. It identified 4. The first one is ambition. The project or the intervention needs to be, usually is very ambitious. Second, it needs to be well implemented and executed. And third, there needs to be a possibility to expand and upscale and self-sustain the intervention beyond the project. And fourth is also about financial sustainability. The presenter also gave the example of using a rapid impact evaluation methodology, which basically has the advantage of being quick and relatively cheap and also reliable. They use the panel of experts to triangulate and the information gathered and triangulate the feedback, and basically he presented the results, which was specific to an energy efficiency project in Southeast Asia, and it showed how the project has enabled to reduce greenhouse gas emission and how there were significant energy savings in these countries, and also this rapid impact evaluation methodology proved to be useful in this situation. So these were, in brief or not so brief, the main points of the discussions.
Thank you, Maru.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, we had in this room here, we had quite a large session, both large in terms of room and attendance, but also we had 6 presentations from 6 different agencies whom we all see here. So who all more or less explored the concept of gender transformative change specifically within the overall agenda of transformative change under, the Agenda 2030. Then we split up into 2 groups, and we worked further, a little bit into depth on the concept and the methods. And I would like now to my 2 rapporteurs, Fomika and Pascal, to respond to the question. So the first question has been, so what were the similarities and differences in how gender transformative change has been defined in the presentations?
Thank you so much. I think there are a lot of discussions in our group. The ideas were not neatly organized, but are we talking about only the first question for now? Okay, so the first question, the definition of transformative change. So there are a lot of discussions, but then I think the general consensus was that there has to be, the changes has to be a very the context specific, including looking at understanding who are the actors, the people, society, culture. So we have to have a recognition that every context is different. The theory of change, if we do it well, will help us understand the big picture. We also talked about we need to recognize that every country is different in terms of changes that need to take place. So in other words, starting point for some countries, this level of change is a big change, but then for others, it's really not much change. So the recognition that we're all different. And therefore, at the end of the day, another recognition, we need to set some kind of a standards or minimum standards that allow us to say that the results we're observing are indeed transformative change. So we have to have some kind of a agreement that we all agree on that these are the actual transformative change. For example, the change in the power structure or cultural values. We also talked in this question about the SDGs. And our consensus is that although there is a specific gender-specific goal, none of the SDG goals, 17 goals, will be achieved unless gender equality and women's empowerment is addressed.
Yes, I'm just going to add some things because, for example, the context specificity that was also transpired very much in our discussion. What also transpired was that it's a very complex issue. And talking about the key elements, we also said that it's particularly important to have a participatory approach and also going back, for example, to the people that we serve and the people who are targeted by an intervention to also involve them in the definition of a transformative change. Then the identification of entry points to transformative change and the importance of interdisciplinarity and joint partnerships. And also very important to really look at root causes and not just the symptoms. So I think this became very apparent in the presentations beforehand.
You want to continue on the question two? The question two was about what are the transformative changes needed to achieve our SDG goals and if we have any good practices.
So we concentrated very much on the best practices, but while defining and sharing best practices, we also always came back to challenges. So you could also rephrase the challenges into best practices and vice versa. So I give you some best practices and some challenges. So best practices certainly are long-term planning in those interventions. The cooperation with other partners. So looking at the context again, not just looking specifically at the project context, but looking beyond that. Utilizing different methods, being innovative, and also mixed methods, things like that. The investment in expertise, for example, so also acknowledging that maybe you don't have the expertise yourself, but there are certainly experts in other organizations or in other networks, so also reaching out. So this is, again, this partnership component. Then also some challenges are a very specific mandate or the nature of programming, and also very much looking at impact. So can we really look at impact and what is the transformation that we aim at and how complex this truly is? So sometimes we just look at the interim change, at the most obvious thing, but what we actually want is impact and transformational change. Then also the acceptance of doing this and evaluating this, and then back again to complexity, so knowing the system, understanding value systems, understanding norms on the ground, and understanding the concept of gender transformative change itself. So making sure that everybody who is involved on the project and program level, but also during the evaluation, what are we talking about? Are we understanding? Do we share an understanding? So that to have one level of understanding, one of the challenges. Yeah.
You can help as well. So for question two, I think the key words from our group were capacity building of not just women as beneficiaries, but then everybody, partners in development process, everybody in their own respective roles in the society. Commitment, ownership of those who are in the position to change the systems, those who are in the decision-making, policy-making platforms. Advocacy is critical through the participation of SCSOs, media, so on and so forth. And then also a critical role of finding a change agent in a context, a minister, someone who, it's just an example, individuals or groups, preferably those sitting at the top of decision-making, policy-making platform, who can actually champion the cause of the gender equality. Yeah.
Good. Would you like to start with the question 3?
See, the thing, the third one, yeah, the last one, okay, I haven't really summarized, but the third question, what methods can we use? There was discussions about some of the specific examples that were raised in the presentations, including using a gender lens in the assessment of all criteria when we conduct an evaluation. But then also, I would say one of the critical issues was the use of case studies in this context, because the gender transformational change are very context specific. So the use of case studies, which is used when you want to learning from best practices, lessons learned, will be probably a very useful tool. The theory of change, of course, is something that has to be done really well upfront, understanding the mechanics of the system, who's involved, what are their relationship, and so forth. Do you want to add something?
I think we also mentioned the difficulty to really measure impact, and that many UN agencies will stop maybe at the outcome level, and that in this way we need more qualitative methods, as you have already said, maybe also stories of change. And this also brought our discussion that we really need to be more creative and to develop new methods to really capture what we're talking about on gender transformative change.
Yeah, regarding the evaluation methodology, we also emphasized that it's very important to be context sensitive, as you just said. Also, because we have repeatedly said how important joint and interdisciplinary work and partnerships are, it was also raised to include partnerships as a criterion, and this is done in many evaluations, but especially when looking at transformative change, this should be considered. Also, alternative data collection tools, such as the inclusion of big data, and also the importance of integrating this gender-responsive approach throughout the evaluation process. So not just at the level of the questions, but already during the design phase, during recruitment, data collection, data analysis, and then also in the last stage where it's about the accountability towards stakeholders, so reporting back the results and findings and lessons learned to the groups that you want to reach. Thank you.
Very good. Yes, as you see, it was a very rich afternoon discussions. I mean, just to remind us what we wanted to achieve. We wanted to have a better understanding and clarification on what we mean by transformative change. I think at least in our groups we got a sense that we, have approaching a common understanding by discovering a lot of similarities, but also a lot of gaps still which have to be filled. I think there was one point in our discussion who said, can't we, we have a global definition, yes, but can't we agree on some progress markers or something, which helps us to be, a bit more specific in assessing if change has been transformative or not. Right, according, on the second objective that we wanted to identify the changes needed to achieve the SDGs, I think, what we learned is also we need to look at dimensions which we haven't considered. I think from that group it came out with the cities. I think that struck me very much, thinking of cities, which are a necessary evil for us, but actually there should be more. So I think that's quite a useful insight. But also, like in our groups, thinking more about power and power relations, for instance, which we, often don't question a lot, and of context, of course. And then finally, the question, what methods are needed? Well, I think, the common understanding is we have to expand our toolbox further. We need to be creative, we need to be flexible, and we need to, be able to identify new and adopt new methods as appropriate in the context, with a specific emphasis on participatory and qualitative methods. So if I may sum it up like this. So thank you all very much. It was a very interesting and very engaging afternoon, despite the long presentations we had now, but it was very good. So thank you very much.